Welcome to Outdoorsy, the podcast where we are redefining the word itself. I'm your host, Madeline. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get into this episode. Just a reminder to check out the show notes so you can get the link to the Patreon to support the show. It is patreon.com/outdoorsy. Your support means a ton. But enough with the housekeeping. I want to introduce to you a guest I am extremely excited about. She is all about finding your own way in the outdoorsy world. Emily Sedona. Emily is a content creator with nearly 1 million followers on TikTok and a thriving Patreon community, YouTube channel, and the works. She's passionate about building confidence for other people, strengthening them through outdoor adventures. But her adventure and her journey has not always been easy, especially when it comes to fitting into like the traditional outdoorsy mold we all know. As someone who isn't necessarily drawn to like high adrenaline sports or extreme outdoor endeavors like myself, she has carved her own path in a community that can often feel very exclusive. One of the things that I really admire most about Emily and the content she creates is that it just feels like she's your outdoorsy bestie. She's so approachable, kind, thoughtful, and just a delight to watch. So, in this episode, I'm going to talk to Emily about her relationship with the word outdoorsy, how that's evolved, how she's navigated the challenges of sometimes feeling like an outsider in this community. And yeah, we're just going to explore like the healing nature of being in the outdoors, solo and finding a sense of belonging in both the online world and in the real world. So, Emily, I am so excited to have you on. I can't wait to hear more about your journey. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on.
Yay. Well, let's start with the first question, which is just how do you define outdoorsy?
See, I think my definition of the word has changed a lot in the past year, even. So now I'm pretty sure that to be outdoorsy, you just need to be able to go outside, right? That's what one of my friends told me, and I'm kind of sticking to that a little bit. But previously, I thought the same thing as you. Like, I need to be hiking, I need to be doing these outdoor extreme sports and things like that. And now I realize that you just need to enjoy being outside and want to be outside and just enjoy nature as it is.
I love it. So, did you grow up loving the outdoors, or like how did this come to be in your life? Something you learned later, something you grew up doing? Like, tell me about your journey there.
Okay, I grew up hating dirt, hating bugs, like never wanting to be outside. I was very much like dressing up in my house, playing dress up, playing with dolls, having tea parties, things like that. And I never wanted to go camping. We never went camping as kids. Like my family never did any of that. And when I was 18, my sister was 15 or 16, and she decided that, or she must have been 16, but she decided that we were going to do a cross country road trip. And we had never been camping before. And so we took my grandparents' minivan and took out the seats in the back, built a bed in the back, and went around the US volunteering at food banks all over the US. And in between the food banks, we were broke. So we would have to just like sleep in the van. And that's where we started going to like national parks and BLM land and free camping and things like that. But prior to that, I had never had any camping experience at all in my entire life. And I feel like it just really activated this part of me. And I've been obsessed with car and vehicle camping ever since.
What a cool story. Oh my gosh, what an adventure to have with your sister too. That's really, really cool. I love how sometimes we find our love for the outdoors through these like unconventional routes. That's so awesome.
Yeah.
Um, so tell me about kind of like what was next. So you discovered that you liked, van camping, going to national parks, being in the outdoors a little bit more. How did you get started with like your niche of content creation and full-time travel and doing all these amazing things in the outdoors?
Yeah. So it's really all by accident. And it really has a lot to do with just being broke. And so, I really wanted to travel and I always had a car and I was just kind of I wanted to go to all these places. My friends always lived on the other side of the country from me. Like I'm a New England girl. My friends were always out in like California and stuff like that. And so eventually I ended up moving to Oregon. And the Pacific Northwest is just like a wealth of intense nature and beauty, and everything is just so big. And I just wanted to really get out there. And so in order to explore more of the PNW, I really just started packing up my car and living out of my car. And so that, I guess when COVID happened, I had to move back to the East Coast. And again, super broke, wanted to go visit my friends. The cheapest option, because I wasn't going to fly out there and rent a car and get a hotel room. I just drove across the country. And so for 2 months, I lived out of my sedan and just visited my friends and hung out. And while I was living in my sedan, I started documenting it on TikTok, and that is when the floodgates like opened. And I remember I did a car tour, which is what I called it, where I showed my entire car camping setup, which looking back, I think it's a little jarring to some people. It's certainly like a far cry from, my van and things like that now, but the whole thing is I made it work with what I had. I was sleeping across the back, and I had made like DIY window coverings out of Reflectix and a t-shirt that I had cut up and glued onto them. And so when I made that TikTok, it got like 9 million views overnight. And just like that, like my life totally changed. And so I kind of used that whole travel thing. Like I was good at the cheap travel in my car and I could make it work. And I just kept doing it and kept filming it and kept showing everybody like these things that I was doing. And it just really snowballed into what it is today. And now I just keep doing it. And I feel really lucky. Like it's my dream?
It's amazing. I One of the things that you brought up though that I think is so important is like you just got started with what you had.
Hmm.
And I feel like I don't know about you, but like when I share my camping setup or whatever, a lot of the comments I get from people is like, okay, great, but like I don't have money to like buy all that stuff.
Yeah.
And my advice is always like, well, get started with whatever you've got now. Like the best gear you have now is like what is the gear you have. So like I love hearing that, you just got started with whatever you had and you were happy with it and you did the thing. Like that's so inspiring.
Yeah, you don't need all the crazy gear. Like you literally you either have a tent or you have a car. That's all you need to be outside and be camping. It really doesn't take much else. Like anything else you can just kind of work. It's funny because whenever I reflect on that time, I always tell people that was the happiest time of my entire life. Like being in like crammed in that little tiny car, sleeping on Forest Service roads, and it's just so funny because it made me appreciate so much, just to do
Yeah.
with what I had. It's fun. It's like a little
Yeah.
taste
Yeah.
to like make it work?
Yeah, exactly. I love that perspective. So like what's going on for you now? Like what are you up to? What are the big projects that you're working on? Like what does life look like for
Well, right now I'm just, I've really leaned heavily into YouTube because I'm enjoying doing long format videos. So right now I would say that's like my creative passion project. It's more like short films. I used to do more vlog style, and now I've kind of blended that more with like my thoughts and like my journal entries and things like that. So it's a little bit more intimate. Just sharing, the girls' feelings on the internet, screaming into the void. But yeah, other than that, I'm just traveling around in my van. I just float around. Like I don't really have a plan. No plan is the best plan. That's what I live by pretty much.
Well, I love how open and honest and like transparent and like you said, kind of like vulnerable you are with your what you share online. Like I love the style of YouTube video that you've started putting out more. It's like you're saying, it feels like I'm intruding on a journal entry, but like in the best way. It's nice. It's really, really nice. But one of your recent YouTube videos, you were talking about how your relationship to the word outdoorsy and like the identity has shifted over time. I would love for you to just like tell us a little bit more about that, like what you mean by that.
Yeah, I mean, I never really would have considered even until, like I said, this year. I thought you really needed to be hiking and things like that in order to consider yourself outdoorsy. And I was actually with one of my friends just like a couple months ago, and she was like, "You are outdoorsy. You go outside, like you camp outside. That makes you outdoorsy." And so that was like a light bulb moment for me. And I was like, "Oh, I am outdoorsy." And I actually feel like that kind of encouraged me to want to start solo hiking and things like that. Like things that I had always been really afraid of because I was like, "Oh, I'm not outdoorsy. I don't do any of that, you know?" And now it's like, "Oh, maybe I am outdoorsy. I can try these things, you know?" But yeah, it's funny because the word really, I think a lot of people allow it to put them in a box or keep them from doing things. Like it's a daunting word for some reason, you know? And for me, I'm more of like a girly girl, you know, like I'm doing my makeup, I'm wearing glitter, like, I'm not hiking 15 miles and in the backcountry. I barely know what the backcountry is. You know what I mean? But just because I don't connect with all of those aspects of it doesn't mean that being outdoorsy isn't for me, you know?
Yeah, it looks different for everyone. I can relate to this so much. I remember weirdly enough, one of the videos I got like the most amount of hate on one time was when I posted a video of me doing my skincare routine when I was camping. And people are like, why do you care about this? I was like,
Gosh.
why would I not do my skincare routine just because I'm camping and in the outdoors? Like, I don't understand. And in my own podcast episode where I talk about kind of like my own personal journey with the word outdoorsy, like I really struggled to like fit into the community that I saw initially before I started kind of like putting myself out there more of people who all kind of looked the same, acted the same, dressed the same, were into all the same things. And I was like, I really don't want to go rock climbing. I really
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
And so I excluded myself from all those groups and I was like, well, I guess outdoorsy is not for me. I guess I'm just not an outdoorsy person. And then it wasn't until later in life when I was like, oh, no, I am. Like I'm way more outdoorsy than people who would prefer to be indoors. That makes me outdoorsy. I don't know. So I can relate to that a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because a lot of my friends climb too. And the climbing community is very intimidating, like extremely, extremely intimidating. And so it's one of those things where I was always like, "Oh, I'll never rock climb." And now I'm like, well, I'm outdoorsy now, so maybe I'll try it. But who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, yeah. And you've probably, as you've put yourself out there more too, you've probably discovered more people who are like you, are more accepting and approachable and more just like accommodating and welcoming than, some of these other people who are like of the opinion that the outdoorsy community is just for the outdoorsy elite or whatever. Like you realize that there actually are more people like you, like me out there than not. So I'm sure that's also a helpful thing too. I wanted to ask you about your relationship to hiking because I really resonated with one of the things you said in one of your recent videos. You're like, you're talking about a hike that you did, and you're like, it's the hardest hike that I did until now. The hardest hike I had done was Kolchak Lake. And that for me was one of the hardest hikes I had ever done. And it was embarrassing to me initially to admit that because everybody has done that hike and everybody's like, oh, well, it's the most popular hike. It's easy. It's not super long. It's not crazy. But for me, that was like a huge challenge. It was really outside of my comfort zone and really hard to do. And also going about it alone, going hiking alone for me has been a source of healing and just really lovely and great. I don't know. I think that you've talked about some of these similar themes in your content too. So I'd love for you to just kind of share like your experience with finding solo hiking healing and lovely thing that sometimes can be very intimidating, but like for you has been calming and healing and lovely. I'd just love to hear you talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, Kolchak Lake is no joke. I think like
Right?
everybody does it. Everybody does it, but that is not a normal hike. I don't know why. First of all, I mean, I don't know if anyone listening to this has done the Kolchak Lake hike, but you went. The parking lot is full at 7 a.m. Like I had to sleep at the trailhead in order to get a parking spot. It's packed with people the entire way, and it's almost 9 miles, right? 8 point something. And
Yeah.
it's really hard, like extremely hard. And that at the time was the hardest hike that I had ever done. And I remember doing that hike and being like, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. And I was like, I'm so glad there are a million people on this trail because I think I'm going to have a heart attack. But, it's funny when you start solo hiking, you can set your own pace in a way that I've found I get stressed out when I'm hiking with other people because you're trying to keep up. You don't want to be, the one dragging behind and then you're overexerting yourself. When you hike by yourself, you really can set your own pace. And then a hike that is extremely difficult becomes manageable because you can take 100 breaks if you want. You can sit for 15 minutes at a time. No one's rushing you. You don't feel some type of way. There's not that pressure like wearing down on you. I think previously to the Kolchak Lake hike, I had hiked like 4 miles. That was like my max and like an easy hike too. And I don't know what got me to wake up that morning and decide that I wanted to do the hike, but I'm glad that I did it. It was great. But yeah, it was just one of those things where I was like, oh, I could probably try to do that. And so I just did it. And this summer, before this summer, I hadn't done any hiking ever, really. So, I mean, the fact that I was doing a hike of that magnitude to me was a huge accomplishment. And then I would get those comments, which I'm sure you get too. It's like, oh, this isn't that big deal of a deal, like all this stuff. And it's like the elitists like coming onto the video trying to diminish the fact that you've done this huge achievement that you're so proud of. And I think that there's magic in being so proud of it. Like, I think people should be proud if they're able to do a 3 mile hike. Because a 3 mile hike this spring was really hard for me, And so I think that that's another aspect of the whole outdoorsy thing. You don't need to be doing these massive hikes to consider yourself successful or outdoorsy or anything like that. And I've really used solo hiking to heal in a way because one, it's really scary. I'm not going to pretend that it's not. I get comments all the time that are like, I'm afraid to hike alone. What do you bring for weapons? All this stuff. And of course, everybody has their own preference to all those things. Bring whatever makes you feel safe. But I'm scared when I first start hiking. Like if I'm doing 5 miles, 1.5, I'm scared the whole entire time. Every time I hear a leaf snap or like a twig snap and a leaf crunch, I'm like whipping my head around, like looking. And I don't want people to think that it's abnormal to be afraid. I just think that there is success in pushing through that mile and a half of nervousness until you've gotten a little bit tired and your brain is like, okay, this is fine. And then you kind of forget that you were afraid until the next time you do a hike. And then it's like the same 1.5 miles of fear. And why am I doing this? But it feels really good when you finish, And then it's like a big achievement. Like I said, hiking and solo hiking was just something that I had never done prior to this year. And it really put me outside my comfort zone. And it's something that I'm really proud of. And I think a lot of people might find it silly that I'm proud of it just because, I'm not doing a marathon. But to me, it is a marathon?
Relate to this so heavily, especially as someone that has been has done kind of more intense hikes, like, and I've done overnight backpacking trips and stuff like that. But then, like, also becoming temporarily disabled this summer, I had to kind of like reframe what I was like considering success or like what I considered, productive outing, and like realizing like, oh, I actually don't have to hit like a certain mileage or a certain elevation gain or even complete a hike. I can just go out for like part of a hike and then turn around to like have that be something that makes me feel good, because it's not about like, you don't have to like necessarily even accomplish anything or do anything. You just need to like get out and move your body in a way that like feels good to you and is like doing the right things for your mindset. Like that's what is the most important part of getting outdoors, right? So yeah, kind of like reframing of like, oh, it's not a competition with anybody else. There's no such thing as a quote unquote real hike or a not real hike. Like if you're hiking, you're hiking.
Yeah.
And kind of like reframing that. It's like such a freeing feeling. And I hope that everybody listening at home like realizes like you don't have to compare yourself to other people, and like however you get out there, it's valid as long as you are feeling like happy and safe. And one of the things I did want to like circle back on that you mentioned is like that fear aspect of hiking, because I get comments on this all the time, was
Mm.
because I camp and hike solo as well for a lot of the same reasons you were saying, mostly because like I get in that competitive mindset, which is like not the mindset you want to be in when you're like going out into nature to like heal. It's like I'm thinking about all the wrong things. Um, but I get a lot of comments from people who are like, how are you not afraid? How are you not scared? Like, how do you do this? And the bottom line is I am scared. I am afraid. And the difference is doing it anyways. And you obviously have to do due diligence to like be prepared and have all the right tools and do your research and things like that. But like the best thing you can do is be scared and just do it anyways, because that fear unfortunately never really does go away. And I think that that's just a normal feeling, and you shouldn't be like embarrassed or ashamed if you are scared, because that's normal for even the most adventurous and most experienced outdoorsy people. Like everybody feels fear. So I'm really glad that you touched on that too.
Yeah, of course. I think it's like all about being human, right? And especially like being a woman out in the woods by yourself. Like, it's totally normal to be a little bit nervous. But yeah, I just wanted to go back to the competitive thing that you were talking about. And it's funny because we all feel a certain way, right? About these goals that we set for ourselves. And it's like, who's making up these rules? Like, we're making up the rules, the outdoorsy community is making up the rules, and it's just silly because it's like I'm constantly reminding myself that there truly are no rules. Like there's no hiking law, right? That says I have to do this or I have to finish the hike or like I'm going to go to jail. You know what I mean? Like you need to just remind yourself that yeah, like you said, just getting out there is so successful.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. I think that I don't know, like there's when I first started running, there was like a joke about like how there were running vest police out on the trails that would like arrest you if you were wearing a running vest and going for a run less than 3 miles. It's like it's the same mindset of like no one cares. Like no, like you're not, there's no rules. No one's gonna like be mad at you except for the trolls online. And those people aren't true outdoorsy people because they're not going outdoors for like the right reasons. So yeah, just letting go of like no one's gonna jump out of the woods and be like, you're doing it wrong, because there's no right or wrong way to just like enjoy the outdoors. So one thing, Emily, I wanted to like touch on too is like, we've talked about exploring the outdoors as alone, like solo and stuff a lot. But one of the things you've talked about is like in the last year or so, like you've really cherished the time that you've spent with other people and community in the outdoors. Like in the past, you've kind of done a lot of stuff on your own, but recently, like hiking or exploring or doing other things, like having those be shared experiences has been like a really nice experience this summer. So tell me a little bit about how you have found that community, you know, how you found belonging that way.
Yeah, so it's interesting because in all of my time, I think I've been doing TikTok for like 3 or 4 years now at this point. And you make friends and you make community online, other women especially that are doing the same thing as me, traveling out of a van and doing all this solo stuff. And so you connect like that. And it's always like, oh, I'll meet you someday. I'll meet you someday. And like this was my year to meet all of these amazing women that I had been talking to for years online. And it's so funny. It feels like literally like internet dating. When you finally have this person in front of you, it's just so shocking and you're so excited, but then it's like just a great bond. I don't know. I'm really grateful because the internet has allowed me to just meet really cool people that I obviously never would have interacted with before. So this summer has really been just meeting friends that I've had for a long time and hiking with them and camping with them. And that was never, ever something that I had done previously to this spring even. So it really was just a summer of girlies, and friendship, which was really healing for me. I'm like going through a breakup and things like that, and I felt like I just like needed my community of women closer than ever. And so it was a driving force to just kind of make all that happen.
Makes me so happy. That's like the dream, right? So what would you say to anybody who's listening to this podcast who maybe has been doing things solo for a while and they are looking to at least make one friend, one person or something, or make that internet bestie and IRL bestie? Like what advice would you give them? How did you kind of bridge that gap?
I think it's important to kind of like when you meet someone, you want to chat with them a little bit online and like suss them out, so to speak. Make sure you're kind of on the same page, you know? Don't just like click on someone's profile and go meet them in the woods somewhere. You know what I mean? But I really think that, you know, it's just, it's really fun to meet people online because you can really find like their niche and find someone that really connects with all the same things that you do. So I don't know. I think that send it is the best advice that I have. I think I'm a pretty shy person sometimes, especially in like groups of people, especially when I'm meeting new people. I can be a little bit more reserved. And so I think that's why I do a lot of solo travel because I'm more comfortable. But I can honestly tell anybody who is looking for more friendship or thinks that they do better by themselves or they're nervous of making new friends, it was amazing for me to take that leap and meet up with people this summer and make new connections and make new friends. It was something that I didn't know that I was lacking. And now I just feel like so excited to meet up with the girlies, you know? And once you meet up with them once, you're like, when am I going to see you again? And so then you're planning trips to see each other. And it's just, it's really fun. It's really fun. So take the leap, make new friends.
Love it. Yeah, I think that it's so scary, but it's so worth it when you do find that community, even if that community is just one person that you like
Yeah.
click with. It's so important. Then you just like learn from each other too, and you get to grow as a person, and yeah, it's great. Now I do want to kind of like shift into another topic that is a little bit more, I guess, a little bit deeper. Like one of the things that is interesting about the outdoorsy community that I have found, and I would love your thoughts on and your perspective, is I find that like a lot of outdoorsy community events and things are just kind of like they're often centered around alcohol. Like there's often like summit beers or like there's a meetup at a brewery or like a camping excursion is like just an excuse to like drink a bunch. Like there's just like a lot of stuff that's centered around alcohol in the outdoorsy community. I'm not really like sure why the outdoor industry like works that way. But one of the things that drew me to your content was your journey with sobriety. And I just think that it's an important conversation to be had in combination with the outdoorsy community because that can feel like really exclusionary for people who are sober, people who are maybe are struggling with addiction or anything like that. Like how have you navigated like your sobriety journey with outdoorsy community and oftentimes being surrounded by this community that's focused on that particular aspect?
Yeah, I have noticed a lot of that. So I've never been to like a bike and brew or anything like that, but I know a lot of people that do things like that. And kind of as previously mentioned, I have spent a lot of time isolating, especially like just being outdoors. Like I really hadn't done a lot outside of myself in the outdoors, you know? So I'm not going to meetups and things like that. But I will say that in real life, I think that, you know, alcohol is just a very common thing that it's a social thing, especially for young people. You know, it's a way to get everybody out and interacting and going to a party, going to a club or whatever. And I can say that in those instances, I think that until I was able to get on my feet and be like stable in my sobriety. And that took like 2 years. I wasn't able to set foot in a bar, you know? And so I think that that can be kind of difficult, especially when you're getting started, because a lot of these meetups, like everybody does go out for a beer after. They're not going out for coffee after so much. You know what I mean? And I think that there probably are groups that do take that initiative, but I do think that it's important to kind of know your own limits. Like if you're in recovery, to kind of know, you know, not to go to the bar if you can't really handle it, if that's not part of your journey at this current moment. And there are plenty of people who in their journey never step foot in a bar again. And that's totally understandable. I think that that's a majority. I think I'm in the minority there that goes out and goes to clubs and stuff like that still. And so I think that like in the outdoorsy community, it's going to make you want to find your group of friends, like your core group of friends that's not going to go to the brewery, you know? I think that that it's funny that that goes hand in hand. I wish I had more of like a advice to give on that other than don't go, but I'm like a really big believer, especially when you're early on in your sobriety journey, to not go anywhere or do anything or see anyone that's going to like inhibit your sobriety, you know? Because if I had to tier things, it would be like sobriety, outdoorsy community, and then like friends, like in an importance. And so it's like, oh, if you can't go to the bike and brew meetup, like that's okay because you need to stay sober. So that's just kind of like my take on it, if that makes sense. But I know that can be
Yeah.
hard, especially when you're trying to like find community, you know?
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And the other thing I would say too is like one of the common threads we're having in a lot of these conversations that I've had on this podcast is like people belong to some sort of a group where they have felt historically excluded from the outdoorsy community, whether that is you are sober and a lot of the events revolve around alcohol, or maybe that's you are from a historically marginalized group and a lot of the groups in the outdoorsy community center around whiteness or center around thinness or whatever it might be. There's like a lot of different people who feel excluded for different reasons and usually outside of their control, right? And
Yeah.
one of the cool things I have found through all these conversations and through just research is that there are so many groups that do cater to specific needs or specific communities of people. So, like, I forget the exact name of the group that did it, but they're like a queer camping group. And they just had like their first big camping meetup in Oregon this summer. And it was 100% dry. Like they advertised, like, this is a substance free event. Like, we want people to feel included and stuff. So, like, if that is a need for you, if you would need to be in a community where it's substance free or whatever, like chances are there is a group out there for you. Like I know it's kind of like more work to find, but like anybody listening who's like, oh, I just like I want community, but like all these communities don't work for me. The other thing I would say is like start your own community. Like if like that's, one thing that you can always do if you're like, oh, I want to do instead of bikes and brews, like have it be biking and coffee or like whatever it is, like start it, do it. If you build a community, people will come. Like there are more people out there like you than different from you. Like you'll be surprised by how many people will join community with you if you just kind of like put your feelers out there. So hopefully people can find community that way too.
Yeah, I love that. I love the like making your own community and starting your own group because I'm sure like when I first got sober, I went to AA a lot. And I feel like that would be like an amazing place to recruit people who wanted to do like sober backpacking, sober hiking, sober biking. Like, that's amazing. I love that. And I feel like that's like a great spot. You know, make a Facebook group page for your city and advertise like that. I love that idea. I wish I had something like that when I was first getting sober because I feel like that would have been really helpful.
I love it. Yeah, yeah. I think that people are becoming more and more comfortable starting this kind of thing too, just like with access to online communities and stuff too. Like it's awesome. So, yeah, well, I appreciate your like vulnerability and like sharing that piece of your story because I do think it's an important aspect of like who you are and your journey and I think it's something that a lot of people identify with and don't see as often. I really appreciate you like sharing that piece of yourself online with people because it's important.
Of course. I mean, I always try to talk about it online because, you know, when I was first getting sober, online people were the only thing I had because I didn't know anybody that was young in my life that was sober. And so I think it's difficult to talk about for me sometimes, but I know that I have to do it because I want to be the person that I needed when I was first getting sober. I want to be that person for somebody else. I know somebody needs to hear it, you know?
Totally, totally. One other thing about that's like to lighten the conversation a
Yeah.
little bit, but like one one other thing that I love about your content is like how much you embrace your own personal style and your femininity and just like all your jewelry and your cute outfits and like your makeup's always done so cute, your hair always looks so good. Like all these things I just love so much. Like I got Emily, I got the nicest comment from someone the other day on one of my TikToks. I was like in all pink or something. And I was like talking about being girly in the outdoors. And they were like, this is giving Emily Sedona vibes. And I was like, literally the nicest compliment I could ever get.
I love that. Oh my
I was like,
God.
I am honored, but like truly I know it's just part of who you are and maybe it's not something that like you think too much about, but it is something that like I've really noticed where I'm like, wow, I realized you don't have to dress a certain way in the outdoorsy world. Like you don't have to wear all neutral colors and like, like I can dress however I want. And that for me, like seeing someone like you online dressing however you want has been just a really great example for me. And I'm wondering, like, can you talk to like how that's been for you? Like maybe this is just how you've like always been and you're like, oh, of course. Or like how you've embraced your personal style and stuff in the outdoors.
Yeah, I think it all just goes back to what we were talking about earlier. And it's like, wear what you got, Like
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go out and buy all these hiking clothes and like outdoorsy, like I didn't have a lot of that to begin with. So, I'm wearing like a cheetah print tube top out hiking, and that's just like how it is. I think that for me, a lot of like the outdoorsy brands don't really speak to me because there's not a lot of color happening there. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed that.
Yeah, there's not.
Yeah. And that's just like not really me? So I think it's important to dress cute, but it is like we talked about before, you get the comments on there that are like, you're wearing that on like a hike, and I'm like, yeah, I look cute. Like I like it.
Yeah, it's not about what you think. It's about how I feel and like,
Yeah.
yeah, how I like how I look. So of course I'm gonna wear it.
Yeah. Yeah, like I'm gonna wear dangly earrings when I go hiking. Like that's just like a thing. I don't know why, but I think it's important to just do whatever you want. And like I said, there's no rules, there's no law to being outside and like what you can and can't wear on a hiking trail. And I think that people need to realize that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of I was just talking to someone else about this, but it was like, you know, we were talking about how sometimes we worry about like what people are thinking about like our bodies outside. Like as someone like I'm not I'm a straight sized person, but like my body is like slightly bigger than like the thin fit quote unquote. You can't define fitness based on how someone looks, but like, what you think of when you think of like a typical outdoorsy person is they're generally like thin. And I was like, when I first started hiking, I didn't look like that. And so I thought everybody that would like see me on the trail would be like thinking about my body and like thinking that I like shouldn't be out here or like that I'm not worthy of being out here. And like kind of the same thing goes through your head with like the clothes that you're wearing too. It's like, well, if I'm wearing this hot pink like hoodie outside or wearing jewelry or I've got my earrings on or whatever it might be, they're gonna think that I'm not like worthy of being out here or I don't belong here. But I was talking to someone else and we were like, people actually aren't thinking about you as much as you think that they are. like
Yeah.
like the person that passes you on the trail, first of all, why do you care what they think? They are just gonna keep walking on their hike. Second of all, they probably like gave you two thoughts and that's about it. They probably aren't like gonna keep thinking about you. And yeah, just do it anyways, because even if they did think something negative about you, like you're not gonna see that person again. Whatever. Like,
Yeah.
if you're comfortable and happy, like that's really what matters.
Yeah, definitely. It's like you're 2 seconds of their day and like that's it. Because think about how often like are we criticizing the people who were walking by on the trail? No, I can't remember what a single person
No.
looks like that I walked by ever 5 seconds after it happens. You know what I mean? Do you,
Yeah.
when you're walking by someone, do you do like the anxious overthinking of how you're gonna say hi to them when you're walking by them?
Yeah.
Like I'm
Yeah, the worst
prepping
is if
for
you have time. You're like
the
walking towards each
preparation.
other for a long time and you're like, okay, what am I gonna wave? I'm gonna not. What am I gonna do?
I'm like sweating as
Yes.
I'm approaching them because I just don't know what I'm gonna say yet. And then I like jumble a bunch of letters together and nothing makes sense. And I'm like,
Yeah, yeah. It's just always a mess. Yeah, you
yeah,
can't. Yeah,
yeah. So I
the
just have to
overthinking.
hope that they're also doing the same thing and that they're not thinking about what I look like or what I'm wearing.
Yeah, yeah. And if anything, they're probably like, damn, she looks really cool. Like, I love those glasses she's wearing,
There you go. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah. No, I think that that was like a huge thing that drew me to your content was I was like, she looks so cool and just so like free. And this is so refreshing to see someone that just like looks so different because they're dressing just however they want to dress. And it was just lovely, lovely to see and very inspiring for me. And I know it might seem like like a small thing to some people, but for me, it was like it was a big thing. So yeah.
it means a lot to me. I really appreciate it because, yeah, like you can catch some heat in the outdoorsy community because you don't look a certain way. And that means a lot to me because, I love clothes and I love things that are different. Like, I very routinely will go to the thrift store and find the ugliest thing I can find in there and be like, I love this. I need to make it work. And then I'm wearing it hiking and I'm like, oh, maybe they don't love my hoodie with the fish all over it, but I do, you know? So I appreciate that. It means a lot to me because, it's the clothes are my passion. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love it. Um, this brings me to one, sorry, since we're just kind of like in a silly goofy mood. I'm so curious, what like your username is Snack Queen?
yeah,
Is
yeah.
there a story behind that?
I can't even really remember. I know that in college, my friends and I had like a banner that said like Snack Queens on it, like hanging. And I do not know for the life of me what that is from. But when TikTok like became a thing, it was like years later and I couldn't think of anything creative, but I knew that you like didn't make it your name. Like it was supposed to be something fun. So I did like Snack Queen 69 and then that account got banned and then I had to make it like Snack Queen 666. And now I'm like maybe I should change that, but I feel like it's just too embedded in who I am at this point.
Love it. I love it so much. Every time I like am reminded that that's your username, I giggle because I'm just like it's so great.
I love it. It's fitting. I mean, I love a good snack, so it's perfect.
Yeah, yeah, it's perfect. Okay, so final kind of like advice you have for people who are struggling to either just like feel like they belong in the outdoorsy community or like they can identify with that term. Like, what are your final words of wisdom for anybody who's struggling to really feel like they belong in the outdoorsy world?
Well, the outdoorsy world, you belong to the outdoorsy world and the outdoors belongs to you. Everyone. It's inherently for everyone, and I think that finding your space, whether that be alone, walking in the woods, or like doing a meetup with a bunch of people, finding the comfortable landing for you will help you feel a more sense of belonging. But I think that for anyone who's afraid to be putting themselves out there or going for a hike in the woods by themselves, I think nature is one of the most healing things on this planet. And you can learn so much about yourself just by getting out there and doing things alone. And I just think that while the initial steps can be very scary to start solo hiking or solo traveling or solo camping, I think that if it's something that you feel called to do, just do it and do it scared. And it will get easier over time, and that fear will diminish, or at least you'll be more comfortable with the fear, and you'll be like, oh, I got this. I've done this before. I can do it again. But I really think that if you are called to be outdoors, then you should try it. Try it. I think you'll love it.
I love it. That's so perfect. Emily, thank you so much. This has been such like a uplifting and great conversation. I hope that everybody listening has been able to relate to some part of your story. And I appreciate your just vulnerability and willingness to share your journey with us because it's been really inspiring and so lovely to watch online. And it's nice that I finally get to chat with you and like hear firsthand your story and dig into this a little bit more. So just thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. You are so kind and so wonderful, and this was so much fun. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, what is next for you? Like what any upcoming projects, trips, things going on in the world of Emily? What's going on for you coming up?
Well, I've been diving more into the world of hosting retreats and things like that. So I have some camping retreats that are all booked for this year, but I will be rolling out an Alaska retreat that should be coming out in the next month or two. It's not out yet, but be on the lookout for that. And then, yeah, other than that, I'm just kind of floating around and seeing where life takes me.
Amazing. I'm so excited that you're hosting trips. I think that you have such a great demeanor for it and just the way that you are so approachable. And like I was saying at the very beginning in your intro, like just your outdoorsy bestie, just like kind, approachable, thoughtful. I am not surprised at all that those trips have sold out, and I will absolutely be plugging your Alaska trip when it comes live, because that sounds incredible as well. So yeah, exciting stuff. If anybody wants to follow Emily, which you absolutely should, I will have all the links to all of her social media in the show notes. So be sure to give her some love there. And if you want to buy her a cup of coffee through her Patreon, you can do that too, or you can subscribe for exclusive content. Lots of good stuff in there. And yeah, follow along with her journeys because they are lovely and just a delight whenever I see you come across my social media feed. I'm just so happy to see whatever you're doing.
Thank you so, so much. I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you for joining us. And thank you, everybody, for tuning into this episode of Outdoorsy. Be sure to rate the podcast 5 stars, subscribe wherever you are listening. And if you'd like to continue supporting this show, you can head on over to patreon.com/outdoorsy, contribute there, see exclusive content, join the Discord community, all that jazz. But until next time, I hope that you get out there in whatever way it feels good to you. And just remember that you belong out there.